All right, let's jump right in. Today, we're going to explore this really powerful, kind of startling idea that you find woven all the way through the biblical story. And it's this: whatever you worship doesn't just get your attention, it's actually shaping who you are and where you're headed. So let's just start with this question. What if the person or the thing that you give your ultimate loyalty to literally molds you into its own image? I mean, when you think about it that way, worship suddenly goes from being just a weekend activity to maybe the single most important choice in a person's life. And this right here, this is the core idea. It's this theme that just keeps popping up, from the Psalms to the prophets, all the way to the very end of the New Testament. It's this idea that our devotion creates a likeness in us. And that likeness, well, that determines our ultimate destiny.
Okay, so to really get our heads around this, we first have to make sure we've got the biblical definition of worship right. Because it's not just about rituals or singing songs, it goes way, way deeper than that.
See, in this view, worship is all about allegiance. It's about who or what you fundamentally trust. Who do you give your ultimate loyalty to? The answer to that question is what sets the entire direction for your whole life. To see where this all kicked off, we've got to rewind. Let's go all the way back to the book of Genesis and take a look at the original design, the original purpose for humanity. You know that phrase, image of God? Turns out it's not just about human dignity or some kind of status. It's more like a job description. The idea is that human beings were created to be these living, breathing representatives of the Creator, mirroring His character and carrying out His good and just rule right here in the world. And you have to realize, this was a totally radical idea in the ancient world. I mean, all the surrounding cultures were building these stone and wood idols to represent the power of their gods. But the biblical authors come along and say, no, no, no. People themselves, living humans, are meant to be the true images of the one true Creator. But of course, the story doesn't stay that simple for long. A conflict emerges pretty quickly. Humanity is faced with this choice of allegiance, a decision between two completely different paths of worship.
And this chart just lays out the two options with, stunning clarity. On one side, if you worship the living God, you start to reflect His life, His character, and you get to participate in what He's doing. But on the other side, if you worship lifeless objects or corrupt spiritual powers, you actually become lifeless yourself, and you end up sharing in their dead-end fate. The critique of idols in the Old Testament is, well, it's absolutely brutal. The psalmist here is just describing them for what they are. They're man-made things. They might look like they have life, but they're completely powerless and dead. They can't see, they can't hear, they can't do anything.
And here it is. This is the punchline to the whole argument. The worshiper doesn't just make the idol. In a very real way, the idol remakes the worshiper. When you give your allegiance to something that's blind and deaf and powerless, you yourself become spiritually blind, deaf, and powerless. So let's look at how this principle actually works, because it's a two-way street. It can either lead to deformation, breaking you down, or it can lead to transformation. The Apostle Paul, in his letter to the Romans, actually traces this whole downward spiral. It all starts with this one bad trade, swapping the Creator for created things. And that one fundamental misallegiance, he says, leads to distorted thinking and eventually a total moral collapse, as people are slowly but surely shaped by the broken things they've chosen to worship. But, and this is so important, the reverse is also true. The New Testament writers argue that when you fix your allegiance, your worship, on the true God that we see in Jesus, you are gradually transformed into His likeness. So beholding leads to becoming. And all of this whole big idea, it's all building toward a really dramatic conclusion, where this choice of allegiance has ultimate, final consequences. When you get to the book of Revelation, the entire cosmic conflict really boils down to this one question: who will you worship? And there are only two choices. You can give your allegiance to the beast, this symbol of rebellious power, and share in its destiny of judgment. Or you can give your allegiance to the Creator and the Lamb, and share in their destiny of victory and new creation. So you see, the big takeaway here is that in this way of thinking, your final destiny isn't some arbitrary reward or punishment that just happens to you at the end. It's simply the logical, unavoidable destination of the path you've been walking all along, a path determined by who or what you chose to serve. And that leaves all of us with a final, really personal question, doesn't it? If it's true that we are all being shaped into the image of whatever we give our ultimate trust and loyalty to, then the question we have to ask ourselves is, who or what are you becoming?